Pertaining to the Paleolithic period, primitively populated the parameters of what we now call Belarus, but modern Belarusians are the descendants of the confluence of Slavic tribes that migrated into the land from the 6th to 8th century, who hunted, farmed, and traded along the rivers, where they built settlements such as Minsk and Pinsk. But the first great city of Belarus was Polotsk, which came to rule a state originally under Viking rulers, and eventually became part of Kievan Rus, a big, sort of unified princedom of mostly Slavic peoples, ruled from Kiev, and which became Christian from 988 after the conversion of Vladimir the Great. The city-state of Polotsk attained its zenith in power and influence under Prince Czeslaw, who ruled for over 50 years, waging war, expanding his land, while also being rumoured to be a sorcerer who could shapeshift into a werewolf. Rus declined in power and eventually fell after the Mongols invaded in 1240. But Belarus was largely spared from the Golden Horde's incursion thanks to dense forests and broad marshland. Belarus instead came under the rule of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which grew this big at its height, enveloping all Belarus. While Lithuania was somewhat tolerant, things began to change, especially after 1569, when Lithuania joined with Poland. Polish nobles began popping up all across Belarus, and were not very nice to the peasants. Life became unbearable for quite a number of Belarusians, who fled south to the wide steppes of Ukraine to team up with the Cossacks, those rugged, freedom-loving warriors, who initiated a number of devastating campaigns against Polish rule. Bad times multiplied after both Russia and Sweden invaded the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and most ruinous for Belarus was the Russo-Polish War, also known as the Deluge, a time of absolute horror. War, massacre, plague, famine. At the end, well, if Belarus went up for sale, it would be 50% off, as half its people were now gone. Though the Poles fought valiantly, their power was broken and Russia was rising. Be it so, Poland remained in charge of Belarus until the late 1700s, when the Russian Empire devoured Belarus in its 3 partitions of Poland. Now, while Russia encouraged Orthodox Christianity to thrive again after centuries of Catholic Polish influence, Belarus was in reality subject to another nation and had little say about what it wanted. Strong repression came with Tsar Nicholas I in the 1840s, who banned the name Belarusia, renamed the land Northwestern Territory, and stopped the Belarusian language being taught in schools. And though the Industrial Revolution beefed up the economy, poverty persisted for many, and many of those many migrated to America or elsewhere in the Russian Empire. Oddly enough, Belarusian culture had a revival when the Germans took over after World War I, which Russia had withdrawn from as it was conquered by the communists. The Russian Empire was rebranded as the Soviet Union and came back and took over, ending the brief existence of the Belarusian People's Republic, a modest attempt at independence. Nationalism was stifled under Stalin, who made it so anyone voicing ideas to his distaste were shot or exiled. Hell came to Belarus in World War II, where the invading Nazis clashed with the Soviets, who were initially forced to retreat. The Nazis destroyed thousands of towns and villages, deported untold thousands for forced labor, and killed many more. Brave Belarusians took to the woods as resistance fighters, doing whatever they could to impede the power of the Wehrmacht, whether it was destroying railway tracks or being assassins like Jelena Masainik, who killed Generalkommissar Wilhelm Kuba by putting a bomb in his hot water bottle. The enormous Soviet push, Operation Bagration, crushed the German army and freed Belarus. But though liberated, the land was in no mood to celebrate. Historian Timothy Snyder notes, by the end of the war, half the population of Belarus had been either killed or moved. This cannot be said of any other European country. The Soviet Union steadily rebuilt Belarus, which became an important manufacturing sector. Radioactive fallout from Chernobyl proved disastrous, and upon independence from the Soviet Union, Belarus remained startlingly Soviet in spirit and politics. 1994 saw Alexander Lukashenko elected president. He won re-election again in 2001, and again in 2006, and again in 2010, and again in 2015, and people were like, something's going on. Lukashenko has been titled Europe's last dictator, and Belarus, the only European country to have capital punishment, has been kept isolated and distant from relations with Europe. Its economy and trade centered mainly on Russia, who had to bail out Belarus from financial collapse in 2011. So Belarus remains a silent and largely unknown nation nestled in Europe's east. A nation who, in spite of everything, has contributed a lot in science, literature, art, sport, a country covered in ancient forests, and whose national library is a rhombicubo-octahedron. Bet you haven't heard that word today. What do you think lies in store for Belarus? Comment below. But for now, bye-bye.
அணு ஆயுதங்களுடைய ஃபர்ஸ்ட் பேட்சை டெலிவரி செய்திருக்கிறதா ரஷ்ய அதிபர் புதின் அறிவிச்சிருக்காரு. செயின்ட் பீட்டர்ஸ்பர்க்ல பேசின அவர் என்ன சொல்லிருக்காரு அப்படின்னா, அணு ஆயுதங்கள் நட்பு நாடான பெலாரஸ்க்கு நாங்க அனுப்பி வச்சிருக்கோம். இப்போதைக்கு அணு ஆயுதங்கள்
So often you ask me a question, why Minsk is such a clean city? Watch it.